Kevin Hart has apologized publicly before. We have all seen it. We know he can do it. The man knows how to say sorry when he feels the pressure to say sorry. So why, after the George Floyd joke at his Netflix roast, did he go on the Breakfast Club and basically tell black people to get over it? Same man, different apology, different community. And DL Hughley just broke down exactly why that double standard is the most important thing nobody is properly discussing about this whole situation. Let's get into it. First, let's make sure everyone is clear on what we are actually talking about here. Kevin Hart's Netflix roast was one of the most watched comedy events in recent memory. Millions of people tuned in live. It was a big deal. Kevin had been building towards something like this for years, his own roast, on his own terms, on the biggest streaming platform in the world, and for the most part it delivered. The jokes were sharp, the crowd was into it. Cat Williams showed up. It was a moment. But then Tony Hinchcliffe made a George Floyd joke, and everything shifted. Now the joke itself is not what this video is primarily about. What this video is about is what happened after. Because what Kevin Hart did after that joke, and more importantly what he did not do, tells you everything about a pattern that DL Hughley broke down in the most precise and honest way. I have heard anyone address this.
which was an off analogy to me, but I think that I think he wanted the powers that be wanted this. This is, you know, because infamy is better than fame. All of this works for somebody. And so to me, I can understand why.
That is DL setting the stage. He is being fair first. He is saying, look, I understand not wanting to apologize for someone else's joke. I get that position. That is a defensible position in comedy. But then he gets to the actual point. And the actual point is something different entirely. Here is where this whole conversation flips completely. If Kevin Hart had never apologized for anything in his career, if he was someone who had always stood on the position that jokes are jokes and he does not apologize, then his stance after the George Floyd situation would be completely consistent. You could disagree with it, but you could not call it a double standard. But that is not Kevin Hart's history. Kevin Hart has apologized before, publicly, on record, and everyone knows which situation we are talking about.
So I'm not mad at him for that. What I do think puts this in a different light is you've established that you will apologize. There's a precedent for you apologizing.
The word precedent is the most important word in this entire discussion, because once you establish that, you are capable of apologizing. Once you show the world that you will bend under pressure and say sorry, you cannot then selectively choose who gets that apology and who does not without people noticing. And Kevin Hart very clearly established that precedent. Let's talk about what happened with the gay community situation specifically, because the details matter here. Kevin Hart had made homophobic jokes in his past. Old tweets surfaced. Old stand-up material came back around. And there was significant pressure on him, especially around the time he was supposed to host the Oscars, to address it publicly. Initially, Kevin tried to hold his position. He tried to say he had already addressed this. He did not want to keep revisiting it, and then the pressure got too loud.
Kevin Hart apologizing when he offended the gay community. He apologized quickly. At first he was trying to hold it, and then he couldn't help it because they started shutting those doors. They stayed with it. The outrage just became just too much. The noise became too loud.
He apologized. He stepped down from hosting the Oscars. He made public statements. He did the full process. Now, I am not here to say that apology was wrong. People can decide for themselves whether it was genuine or pressure-driven. But the fact of the apology is what matters for this conversation. Kevin Hart showed the world when the pressure is strong enough, when the doors start closing, when the noise gets loud enough, he will apologize. That is the precedent. That is the established behavior. And that established behavior is exactly what makes what came next so impossible to ignore. Now here is the core of everything. The thing that DL Hughley said that nobody else has said this clearly.
And I find it very interesting that oftentimes Black people, specifically Black celebrities who offend the Black community collectively, they like to hold their nuts on apologizing to the Black community. But when they offend communities outside of the Black community, they are quick. I'm talking about Usain Bolt quick to apologize. I got a problem with that. I got a problem, because if you're gonna keep it real, keep it real. If you hard, you're gonna stand on it, stand on it.
That line is perfect because it captures exactly what DL is describing. There is a speed difference. There is a different urgency applied to different communities. And that speed difference, that difference in how quickly the apology comes and how seriously the offense is taken, reveals a hierarchy. Some communities get the fast apology. Some communities get the Breakfast Club interview where Kevin basically defends his decision. And the community that gets the slower, more reluctant, more defensive response is his own community. DL is not saying Kevin Hart is a bad person. He is not saying Kevin Hart hates black people. He is saying the pattern of behavior reveals something about who Kevin Hart feels accountable to. And that accountability is clearly not equally distributed. This is the part of DL's breakdown that honestly should not even need to be said, but apparently it does.
Apologize to anybody. That's what I don't understand. If you are going to apologize, if you do offend any group, and you feel a need to apologize, whether it's out of pressure or it's from the heart, it should be your own people first. That's who you should elevate. That's who you should be answering to, your own people first.
That is not a radical position. That is not asking for special treatment. That is asking for the same treatment that every other community already gets from Kevin Hart, just applied consistently to the community he actually comes from. Think about what DL is really saying here. He is saying if you are going to have a system where apologies happen when pressure is applied, then at minimum the community that helped build you, the community whose culture you have profited from, the community whose stories you tell on stage, that community should at minimum receive the same level of accountability that you give to everyone else. That is not a high bar. That is just consistency, and Kevin Hart did not clear that bar. Now, here is where the Kevin Hart defense completely falls apart. And
I think in this particular case, Kevin, he kept bragging on the Breakfast Club about how it was his production, right? That means he got to make decisions. There have been any number of roasts prior to this, whether it was the one about Donald Trump, whether it was the one with Joan Rivers, all of these people, including Tom Brady, said, these people are off limits. We don't like these jokes. Let's cut them. Just like Kevin did. There were a lot of jokes that were cut.
Stop right there. Kevin Hart cut 18 jokes from that roast. 18. He had the power. He exercised the power. He used that power to protect certain things and certain people. And the George Floyd joke was not one of the things he chose to protect. That is not an accident. That is not an oversight. That is a decision, a conscious, deliberate, production-level decision that Kevin Hart made as the person in charge of his own show. You cannot brag about being the executive producer and then claim you had no control over what aired. You cannot cut 18 jokes and then say you did not know you could cut jokes. Those two things cannot both be true. If there is one piece of evidence that completely destroys the I couldn't stop it defense, it is the Tom Brady comparison.
And then you said that what were you supposed to do? Stop him in the middle of the roast. And Tom Brady did just that. And Tom Brady was defending Robert Kraft, and Robert Kraft was sex trafficking. He defended a sex trafficker. And you can't even defend a dude that got...
Tom Brady, at his own roast, stopped a joke in real time about a person who was connected to sex trafficking allegations, which is arguably more controversial than almost anything else you could bring up. And Tom Brady still said no, not this, cut it. Kevin Hart, whose entire brand is built on his community, whose comedy career was launched on black culture, whose audience is majority black, could not find the same energy to stop a joke about a man whose death sparked a global movement. Tom Brady protected Robert Kraft in real time. Kevin Hart did not protect George Floyd's memory with the same energy. The comparison is not flattering, and it should not be. Here is something that DL pointed out that I think is actually the most revealing moment in this whole situation. Kevin Hart did not have to go on The Breakfast Club. Nobody made him do that. He chose to go on there and address the controversy publicly.
Making a joke about a man who was killed in front of us. There is nothing funny about that. And then you know what? You carried your little tiny black ass on The Breakfast Club to bring it back up. Why? Because you knew you were wrong. You didn't have to come on there and defend yourself, but you did.
I don't think
and
he
don't tell me The Breakfast Club wanted him to come on there to talk about some other stuff. They didn't. They wanted him on the show to bring this up for the very same reason that Kevin had the nerve to not cut the George Floyd joke, and that was for likes.
That is a sharp observation. If Kevin Hart genuinely believed he had done nothing wrong, the smart move is to say nothing. Let it die down. Do not give it more oxygen. Go back to making movies and selling out arenas. But he went on The Breakfast Club. He brought it back up. He put himself in a position to defend a decision that he could have just let fade from the news cycle. Why would someone do that if they were completely comfortable with their decision? DL's read is that Kevin Hart went on The Breakfast Club because on some level he knew he had made the wrong call. And going on the show to defend it publicly was his way of processing that guilt while still not fully owning it.
My thing again is I do not understand, and I'll say this ad nauseum, why some were protected and others weren't. And if you were going to protect anybody, it should have been the people who look like you.
That's my point.
That is the whole argument in 2 sentences. If you are going to use your power as a producer to protect people, and Kevin Hart clearly has that power and clearly exercises it, then the people who should be at the top of that protection list are the people whose culture you come from and whose support made everything you have possible. That did not happen here. Here is the question that matters beyond the immediate controversy. Does this actually cost Kevin Hart anything? The honest answer is probably not in the short term. He is too big. His movies still perform. His tours still sell out. Netflix is not going anywhere.
You know? I think, but again, we talked about this last week. If the goal was numbers, he got them. If the goal was conversation, he got it. If the goal was resonance, he got it. Everything that are the markers for success. People viewing, people still talking about it being noteworthy, it's clickable.
Congratulations, Judas. That line is devastating because it is true. By every metric that the entertainment industry uses to measure success, the roast was a success. Numbers were up. Conversation was everywhere. Kevin is still doing press. The cost is not commercial. The cost is trust. The cost is the relationship between Kevin Hart and the community that built him. And that cost does not show up in box office numbers or streaming data. It shows up over time, slowly, in the way people talk about your legacy, in the way the culture remembers you when the moment has passed. Kevin Hart is going to be fine financially, but the question of who he chose to protect and who he chose not to, that question is going to follow his legacy in ways that no amount of successful movies can fully erase. So here is where we land after breaking all of this down. Kevin Hart has apologized before. We know he can do it. We know he will do it when the pressure is strong enough and the right doors start closing. The gay community got that apology. They got it fast. They got it publicly. Black people got a Breakfast Club visit where Kevin basically explained why they should not be upset. DL Hughley did not say Kevin Hart is a terrible person. He specifically said Kevin Hart has done good things. He is a hard worker. He has earned what he has. But consistency matters. Accountability matters. And when you have established through your own behavior that you are capable of apologizing and you choose not to apply that same standard to your own community, people notice. They noticed. The question is not whether Kevin Hart will survive this controversy. He will. The question is whether he will actually reckon with what DL laid out so clearly. Whether he will look at the pattern of who gets his apologies and who does not and decide that the community he came from deserves at least the same level of accountability he gives to everyone else. That answer is still pending. Drop your thoughts in the comment. Do you think Kevin Hart owes black people an apology, or do you think DL Hughley is being too hard on him? Because this conversation is not over. Subscribe if you want breakdowns that actually go all the way in. We do not do surface level here.